So first of all, number of groups we want to thank and recognize. This debate is being conducted in association with the Rhode Island Student Political Empowerment Conference, which is an annual gathering of nonpartisan college students from Rhode Island and area schools. So a lot of their students are here who are participating in that conference today, and I want to recognize Sarah De La Cerda, who's chairing the conference this year. Sarah, where are you? Sarah, back there. Thank you, Sarah. How about a thank to Dunkin' Donuts for all the coffee and donuts? We want to recognize our media partner. Well, the moderator will introduce shortly, but golocalprov.com is our media partner where we're live streaming. So if you want to text or call anybody back home and tell them they can watch the debate live, they can just go to our website and they'll get forwarded to all the right spot. Or is it on your page too, Josh? Somewhere. So, but it's being live, but rightfreedom.org. We also are accepting audience questions on Twitter. So there's two ways you can do that. If you have a mobile device, you can see right up here, UnleashRI is the hashtag to use. If you'd like to submit a question and you don't have a Twitter device, I should use this thing. There we go. We're out in the back is Larry and Justin. Justin, where are you? We have two stations in the back, so just walk up there, tell them your questions, and they'll submit it on Twitter for you from their computers. So either way, you can either do it from your seat on your handheld or just go to the back of the room and see our guys with the shirts, and they'll submit your Twitter questions for you. I think that the event will also be archived and available online after, so you'll all be on TV. Or the internet. Okay, so the debate. The question is right here. What's really in our best interest when it comes to public policy? And I guess the core questions are we better off with a more activist government in our lives or less? Is it moral? That'll be part two of our debate. Public policies. What's the morality involved in personally and through government? If you can go next one, Justin. I want to introduce our participants who will, in the first segment, we're going to have Stephen Moore, who's a former Wall Street Journal editorial board, now chief economist with the Heritage Foundation, appears frequently on Fox News. So Steve Moore, come on up. On the other side, we have Tom SGOUROS, a local policy expert, who is a writer for rifuture.com, has contributed to Go Local Prov as well. And Tom SGOUROS, who will be in the second segment. These are our professional debaters. Rich Benjamin is a senior fellow at Demos. He appears regularly on MSNBC, and we're thrilled that he's here today, up from New York. Rich Benjamin. Don Watkins, he's from the Ayn Rand Institute, and he'll be taking part in the second segment of our debate. Don Watkins. Now, one of the unique features of this debate is we're having some students in the first segment debate alongside the professionals here, and that should be fun. So joining Tom is Samuel Bell. Samuel is now a graduate student at Brown University, and he is the state coordinator for the Progressive Democrats of America. Samuel Bell. And joining Steve, also a Brown University undergrad, and he is the chairman of the Rhode Island Federation of College Republicans, and that's Justin Braga. I'll save our moderator for last and let him take it away. Also, we have Justin Katz from our research team operating the slides, and he'll be feeding the Twitter questions to our moderator. You know me and our moderator, what I'll turn it over to in just a second. From Go Local Prov, he's the founder and CEO of Go Local Prov, Josh Fenton. This is the state of the state, or one view of the state, and I want to say a disclaimer. This is not everybody's view of what our state is, but it's what we decided we want to debate today. This does not represent any panelist view, but these are just some facts. I'm not going to go through each one. The chart on the right just shows you really, you can see the other ones for yourself, but this chart shows you that compared to peak employment levels prior to the recession, Rhode Island is worst in terms of recovering jobs as compared to pre-peak. So the question is, what are we doing wrong? Why? The core of what this debate is all about. And that's what we want to talk. We want to ask the panelists to make sure we try to relate everything back into creating jobs, because jobs is what we think we need in this state. So the first segment we're going to talk about is the economics of public policy. And there'll be two subsegments within here. First, policy philosophy, and then we'll discuss some specific ideas. At the top are the core questions that the moderator will lead you through. In the middle are the topics we want to apply those questions to. And on the left and the right are just some generic views that don't represent any panelists up here. They're just views from the left or right that to throw in to give you something to think about. So let's get the debate underway, and let me turn it over to Josh Fenton.
Obviously want to thank Mike for putting all the hard work together to get a really outstanding discussion going. Too often, obviously, in Rhode Island, different viewpoints don't come together and get around a table and start hashing things out. So great kudos to the panelists and to Mike for doing all the hard work to bring folks together. This morning, we really want to start with hearing some really interesting folks talk about this, and I think the question is, you know, obviously Rhode Island's economy's in a bit of a funk. Unemployment's high. The economy's not functioning particularly well. It's not recovering as other parts of the country are proceeding. And want to ask each of the four of you, I'm going to start with Stephen on the far right, to give an opening statement.
I'm not on the far right.
Touche. To give an opening statement and frame the discussion a little bit from your perspective. So Stephen, please start.
Thanks, Josh, and thank you to the Freedom Foundation for putting this together, and thank you all. I mean, I know that you all have very busy lives, and there are a lot of other things you could be doing on a Saturday, so it's fantastic that so many of you care enough about your great state of Rhode Island that you're here. So appreciate your turning out for this important event about what we can do to improve Rhode Island. I had such a great, when I took the train from Boston yesterday and got into town, I just had the nicest reception. I was walking down the train terminal, and this little old lady saw me. She threw her arms around me. She was so excited. She said, "I know you, don't I?" And I said, "Ma'am, I don't know." She said, "I'm sure I've seen you on TV somewhere." And I said, "Well, I'm not sure, ma'am." I said, "What do you watch?" And that kind of puzzled her. She was so endearing. She said, "Wait a minute," she said, "didn't I see you on Wheel of Fortune last week?" And yes, ma'am, that was me. So that was a nice introduction to being in Rhode Island. Look, let me make a couple very quick points. Our national economy isn't doing so hot either. Rhode Island's, you know, as you just saw from some of these statistics, is a lagging state, but in the country as a whole, we've had a really subpar recovery. This has been the worst recovery from recession that we've had since the Great Depression. Something's going terribly wrong in this country with respect to our economic policies, and so we have to fix what's wrong in Washington, and we have to fix what's wrong in Rhode Island. By the way, I love this state. I come here every summer to vacation. It has so many assets. There's no reason that Rhode Island should be such a poor performing state. In fact, if you go back 50 years ago, Rhode Island was one of the three richest states in the country. One of the three richest states in the country. You have to ask the question, what's gone wrong over the last 40 or 50 years to move this state to one of the most prosperous places on the globe, you know, almost literally the Hong Kong of North America, to now a state that has high unemployment, has declining income, and just not enough jobs for the citizens of this great state. One of the things that you all ought to think about in terms of why getting growth back is so important, one of the things that concerns me as I look at these statistics about what's happening in Rhode Island is what it is doing to families and the legacy of this state. And what we found is that there's been a kind of hollowing out of the young people in the state. Now, when you ask the question, who's leaving? Who's leaving Rhode Island? I mean, look in the audience here. I mean, you know, we're you know, a lot of people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. You know, the young people have to leave Rhode Island because there are not enough jobs, and that is a tragedy because it means your problems are actually going to intensify in the next 10 or 20, 30 years. You know you've got a problem with your pensions and paying, paying your bills in this state. And if you don't have the young workers, I mean, everybody in this room probably knows a young college graduate. You've invested so much human capital in these people who have had to leave the state. We'll talk about what some of the solutions are, but I want to give you one statistic hot off the press, and then I'll turn it over to the other side, just to give you a sense of the direction that Rhode Island is going. There were new statistics that just came out literally on Tuesday, so just this week from the IRS, which tracks these are actual tax return data for every one of the 50 states. And what the data showed for this latest year, 2012, so this was the change from 2011 to 2012, is that Rhode Island had the third largest decline in the number of people who filed a tax return. And they also had the third, when you look at people coming into the state and people leaving the state, guess what? Only 2 states did worse than Rhode Island. One of them was New York, and the other was my home state of Illinois. And there's something wrong in Rhode Island. What this means, if we don't turn this around, you're going to see a gradual reduction over time of this state. I'll just kind of give you a kind of preview of, I think, the case that we're going to make, which is, look, it's not that hard to turn around the state. If you just turn those dials, those policy dials that are so turned in the direction of anti-growth, and move them more in a growth direction, you will see businesses moving back into the state. You will see jobs coming back. I mean, it can happen really, really quickly. And so I'm an optimist about this state. And I think the fact that there are so many people here today that care about this state, you know what needs to be done. And I think it's a hard case to make, by the way. It's a hard case to make that the problem with Rhode Island is it's not liberal enough. Right? I mean, that's kind of a hard case to make, given the fact that this is the second or third most liberal state in the country. Why don't we try some free enterprise solutions to dealing with the problem? I mean, why don't we try something new in Rhode Island? Thank you.
Stephen, thank you. Both Tom and Sam are just itching to respond to that opening statement, so we'll let Sam start off this morning. Sam?
All right. So I just want to start by clearing up what I think is one of the most common misconceptions about Rhode Island, which is that somehow our state government is politically liberal, which is just not true. The people of this state are very liberal. We voted for Barack Obama by a very strong margin. Only Hawaii and Vermont voted for Obama by stronger margins. The state legislature is completely controlled by Democrats. In the House, they're 69 out of 75. In the Senate, they're 32 out of 38. Yet those Democrats are really quite right-wing. And I'm just going to start. Yes, they are. I'm just going to start with a couple of issues that divide the Democratic Party and the Republican Party nationally. Let's start with choice. One of the main issues that divides the two parties. In Rhode Island, most of the Democrats in the General Assembly are anti-choice. Tell me another blue state where the Democrats do not support a woman's right to choose. Tell me another blue state where the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House both have A ratings from the NRA and took thousands of dollars in illegal, I might add, campaign contributions from them. Show me another state, another blue state, that in the past 10 years passed a voter ID law, even though the chairwoman of the Democratic National Committee called the Speaker of the House and begged him not to do it because these laws are Republican laws. And show me another blue state that's pursued economic policies that are as extremely conservative as what we've done here in Rhode Island. Nationally, one of the big issues that divides the party was the Bush tax cuts for the rich. Democrats in the Senate strongly opposed it, yet here in Rhode Island, only a few years later, we decided to do the same thing, and we did it in a more extreme fashion. We cut the top income tax rate by nearly 40%, and we left the bottom rate where it was. And to pay for it, we slashed the budgets of cities and towns all around the state. And so they had to compensate by raising our already obscene property taxes even higher, putting the burden on middle-class families and small businesses. And yes, when you do have the highest property tax rate in the country among comparable cities, as one study says of Providence, it's going to discourage some businesses, and liberals want to fix that, and part of the reason that's there is because we slashed income taxes for the rich. And finally, when it comes to austerity, few other states have pursued austerity as aggressively as Rhode Island. We used to actually have some public sector jobs here, but we slashed them ferociously, to the point where we now have the second fewest per capita public sector employees in the country, which is impressive given how few jobs we have here. So our prescription on the left is simple. We want to return to basic Democratic Party public policies, not extreme liberalism. The fight between the left and the right wing of the Democratic Party here is not really the fight between the progressive wing and the Wall Street wing. It's the fight between basic, simple Democrats. Democrats who follow the public policies of the Democratic Party and Democrats who follow the public policies of the Republican Party. We just want to turn that around, and when we do that, we think we can see the same amazing economic results we're seeing from Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, other states that follow actual Democratic Party policies.
Thank you, Sam. One request from the center is that we keep comments within the framework of philosophy rather than party. So that's the one moderator request that I'll ask you to follow on. Sam raises some big points about the lineup at the legislature and whether or not we are a blue state or a red state and what the policies really are. Justin, do you want to give us an opening statement and some framework to both the previous discussions that have taken place?
Absolutely. Well, Josh, thanks for moderating the debate. I'd also like to thank the center for hosting this debate and all of the sponsors. I got to tell you, after that last opening statement, Sam, I really got to tell you, I wish the politicians in this state were as conservative as you said they were on economic policy, because I think we'd be a lot better off. You know, Steve brought it up in his opening statement. It's a great point. People are leaving this state. And it's not just people that are leaving the state, but it's the money that comes with them. It's tax revenue that's leaving this state as well. We have the highest unemployment rate in the nation in this state. So I'm kind of baffled to say that we don't have enough government in this state already. You know, the problems that exist with Rhode Island are the fact that taxes are too high. You know, we have the highest sales tax in New England. We have the highest corporate tax in New England. You know, those are not just, you know, sometimes I think those are really just looked at as talking points. But you really have to think about it from a competitiveness perspective. When we're talking about tax rates being too high, I think oftentimes it's associated with saying, well, we're not giving enough money to the rich and et cetera, et cetera. But really what we have to look at is who these policies are hurting the most. And these policies are hurting the 8.7% of people who are unemployed in this state and cannot find a job, and the countless others who have already dropped out of the labor force because it's been so long since they've been able to find a job. This is unacceptable for our state. We have to take a look at the regulations in this state that are harming businesses. We have to take a look at the tax policies, such as a high corporate tax rate, a high sales tax that are harming consumers and businesses alike. We have to take a look at things like the franchise tax, for example, which are also harming businesses in this state and are essentially penalizing businesses for their very existence. These people are job creators. We have to encourage them to come back to Rhode Island. And so I guess if I could sum up my opening statement in a phrase, it's that big government has failed Little Rhodey, and we have to change that. Thank you.
That was great. Justin, you immediately go to the head of the class for staying within the time framework. Tom?
Well, let's see. I guess the first thing I'd like to do is also to thank Mike and the center for having us here today. I also would like to, I guess I'd also like to say that Larry up there sounds like sort of a dope to me. Like, that does not represent my perspective. That's not even really an approximation of my perspective. There's a misconception here that because I oppose you, I must believe the opposite. That's simply not true. I do believe that there is a place in public policy for compassion and responsibility to other people. I believe, for example, that Barrington has a responsibility to Central Falls. But I also believe in taking the world as it actually is, and not as the labels would sort of imply to us. And I think that I think it's worth talking about some of the things that were brought up by Steve and by Justin over there. For example, the fact that Rhode Island used to be one of the richest states in the country. That is true. Similarly, Providence, Pawtucket, Woonsocket, those used to be the richest places in Rhode Island. 50 years ago, those were the places that were the richest towns in the state. Now they are the poorest places in the state. What exactly happened? What happened was that there was a lot of public policy that neglected cities, that involved sucking resources away from cities. Rhode Island, because it is largely an urban state compared to other states, suffers by comparison to them. We do, in fact, have the highest unemployment rate in the nation just now, but I think it's also worth noticing that a lot of analysis that happens based on state borders is really just sort of a historical accident. Why look at a state? What does the state of Rhode Island actually have to, how can you make a meaningful comparison between Rhode Island and Montana? It's difficult. So one thing I did recently was I looked at unemployment rates by metropolitan area, because it seems like comparing one city to another is probably safer. And what I learned is that Rhode Island's, the Providence metropolitan area is also not a great performer. We are pretty bad, pretty far down on that list, 330 something out of 370 metropolitan areas in the country. But that also means that there's 40 cities in 14 states that are actually doing worse than us. So if the case that you want to make is that state policy is the issue here, and I can see some people laughing and giggling in the audience, but you know, this is what actual analysis is about. Actual analysis is asking the questions and seeing if you can come up with an understanding of what actually is going on. And when you look at the fact that there are metropolitan areas in 14 states that are doing worse than us, half of the cities in California are doing worse than we are. A quarter of the cities in Texas are doing worse than we are. Then you have to ask, is state policy really what's at issue here? Or is there something else going on? And I think that that's a valid question worth asking, and it's one that I see very little inquiry about. To my mind, when you learn about the unemployment rate, that's where inquiry begins. That's not where it stops. And I think I'd like to respect the time limits, and so I think I should stop there for a moment and let some of the other points that I'll care to make come out during the subsequent questions. Thank you.
Well, let's take this up a notch. Let's really get into unemployment. I mean, Rhode Island, I think there's a few facts that are indisputable. Extremely, I think we're at 66 months above the national average, somewhere around there. Go Local has Go Local Prov. We also have Go Local Worcester, so we're up in Worcester a lot. It's a city that does not have the exact same assets as Providence does. I think Providence has a number of competitive advantages. The economy is significantly better in Worcester, Massachusetts than it is in Providence, Rhode Island. So, Sam, a couple other factors. Hispanic unemployment. Providence, I believe, 2 of the last 3 years has led the country or been at the highest in the country. Where are we? How did we get here? And how do we get out of this? What are the policies that need to be driven to really improve the employment sphere of the state?
So I'm just going to start with a very brief history of Rhode Island and Rhode Island politics. We used to be a less conservative state. We never had a pro-choice state legislature or anything crazy like that, but we used to have a much more moderate state legislature. And then in 1993, when we were going to elect a really real Democrat as House Speaker, the Republicans banded together with the conservatives and they took control of the House of Representatives. And ever since then, public policy has been getting more conservative, but things really turned around in 2003 when Bill Murphy, the arch-conservative Speaker of the House, who's now the chief lobbyist for the gun lobby and the payday lenders, he took control of the speakership. And the speakership is the most powerful position in the state. And when that happened, we started to see a range of very conservative public policies. The first was a surge of austerity, of cuts to public sector employment that resulted in us now having the second lowest per capita public sector jobs in the country. And in 2006, they passed the Tax Cuts for the Rich, which accelerated the austerity and wound up causing cities and towns to have to raise property taxes. So our basic prescription is to just start by repealing some of those policies.
Actually, Sam, can I break in here?
Yeah, please.
Sam, you talk about the tax cuts for the rich that happened in 2006, but I think it's important that people also remember the tax cuts for the rich that happened in 2001, the ones that happened in 1998, and the historic tax credit that happened through 2003 through 2010, the film tax credit that happened after that. I think we should also make sure that people understand that though the corporate tax rate is in fact 9%, which is the fourth highest in the nation, 94% of the people of the companies that actually pay a corporate tax in Rhode Island pay the minimum. The corporate tax brings in about $144 million every year. There are, the tax division cataloged what they call 45% of the special tax breaks for the corporate tax rate. 45% of them add up to $85 million. They have no way to price the other 55% of the tax breaks. The fact that the tax rate, that the corporate tax rate is high, is actually much less important. As when you look at it in terms of the size of the state's economy, the Rhode Island corporate tax is a smaller tax than anywhere else in New England.
I'm going to jump in.
We are the 18th, the Tax Foundation calls us the 18th highest in the country.
Stephen, you try and answer my question on the issue of unemployment. I do want to really focus on this. I think this is a critical issue facing Rhode Island. Please jump in.
So, look, I'm going to admit something. I probably know less about this state than anyone in this room. I don't live here. I don't live in the Northeast. I've studied states. I've done some of the seminal work on, why some states are growing and others aren't. You could go to the ALEC report called Rich States, Poor States, where we do a rating of the states in terms of looking about 20 policies that we think are extremely important in terms of understanding why some states are growing and others aren't. I think it was Tom that made the point, you just can't look at a state, you have to kind of look at other areas. The truth is, you're right, Tom. I mean, the entire northeastern region is really facing a meltdown right now. I mean, the big story in America is the center of economic power and the center of political power in this country. The center of gravity is shifting from the Northeast to the South, and it's happening every single day. So you're right. It's not just Rhode Island. It's Massachusetts. It's New York. It's Vermont. These states are really hurting. And by the way, anybody in this room want to guess which of, when I mentioned this new report on population, there's only one state in the Northeast, only one state in the Northeast that actually gained population over the last 5 years. Anybody want to guess what state that was? New Hampshire. New Hampshire. New Hampshire has no income tax. They do things right. Rhode Island does, unfortunately, according to our analysis, and it's highly predictive where growth will come and where jobs will come, it does a couple things really wrong. One is, when you talk about tax cuts for the rich, look, Rhode Island still, when you look at the taxation of the people at the top 1%, and by the way, who are those people? Those are people who own businesses. Those are the job creators in the state. They're highly mobile, by the way. You actually, in Rhode Island, have one of the highest burdens on the top 1% of virtually any other state. So
Stephen?
I would eliminate
I'm
the
sorry, I'm
state
just going to have to jump in there because that's just not true.
The top tax rate, the top income tax rate in Rhode Island is 5.99%. That puts us lower than 24 other states.
No, my point is, though,
I got to.
I wasn't saying what
some of
the
those
rate is.
states.
Hold on.
Rate matters. What I'm saying is what if you look at the share of taxes paid by the top 1% in Rhode Island, it's higher than almost.
Yeah, I don't-
Okay, hold on one second.
Second point I want to make.
The top 1%
Second point I want to
pays
make
an
is
effective tax rate of 6.4%, but the median taxpayer, the middle 20%, pays an effective rate of 10.5%. When you add up all the property taxes and sales taxes and other regressive policies we have in this state.
These are
But,
So let me interject.
Yeah.
is this?
Let me
tax-
just say this, though. It's hard to make this case. I mean, you're trying to make the case that the rich in Rhode Island are undertaxed, and there's just no evidence of that. Rhode Island is a state that imposes a high tax
wait.
on the rich, which is a reason
Justin?
that they're leaving. I mean,
Justin, I'm gonna give you. You're gonna get rewarded for actually staying in the time frame of the opening statements. So I'm gonna let Justin to jump in here. And the original posed question, we're now into really the issue of tax policy on the highest
if I could-
income strata. But let's go back to unemployment.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to comment. I'm not going to throw out a bunch of numbers here at you, but what I just wanted to say is, look, I know personally how difficult it is to have someone who is unemployed in your family. My dad was unemployed for a whole year before I went to college. It's difficult. It's difficult to find a job out there. Now, Tom brought up an interesting point earlier about, why do we look at states for unemployment rate? I think one of the reasons perhaps we do that is because in the United States we have a federalist system where we give states police powers to implement their own sort of policies, such as some of them being tax policies, education policies, and we allow states to compete. It's one of the great things about our system here in the United States. And we have to look at what states are doing better than Rhode Island. I think one state, for example, would be New Hampshire, as Steve said. New Hampshire has no income tax rate, no sales tax, and yet New Hampshire has a 4.5% unemployment rate, much lower than Rhode Island's.
And better services.
Exactly, much better than Rhode Island's. When we talk about unemployment rate, it's not just about a number. We're talking about people here who cannot find jobs. And so I don't think we can sit here and continue to say that keeping taxes high and raising them even more and allowing government to do more is better for Rhode Islanders when it's left 8.7% of people without jobs. It's simply not fair to continue that argument in this state anymore, and we have to stop.
I'm gonna let Tom respond for 30 seconds, and then we're going to the audience.
For 30 seconds, Steve, I understand that you don't know a lot about Rhode Island, and fortunately, I wrote this book called 10 Things You Don't Know About Rhode Island, and I've inscribed this copy for you. So
Shameless plugs are not allowed during this discussion.
We can fix that. But here's the thing: you say that there's no evidence, but just a minute before that, I presented you several points of evidence to say that the rich are taxed at lower rates than. Sam offered you some evidence as well. You cannot say that there is no evidence. Justin, you say you're not going to throw out numbers. Well, here's the thing. Numbers are the heart of the issue. If you are going to remain ignorant of the numbers, you are going to come up with stupid answers to these questions. You have a responsibility. I believe that decisions that are made at the State House are serious decisions. These are, lives are ruined. People die because of decisions that are made at the State House. I believe that anybody who is doing serious public advocacy of issues that are going to be decided in a forum like that has a moral responsibility to educate themselves, to learn those numbers, to understand, to learn the details of the state that you are talking about, because this is not a game.
Right.
Tom,
Now, do you
So,
want to
okay, I'm gonna pause us here.
Tom, have you read Rich States, Poor States?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so you know that Rhode Island makes
and I know
the 48th state in terms of your not your performance, your outlook, and the other
I know.
the other factor that you're not taking into fact. Look, if you want to make the case that Rhode Island is undertaxed, I just think that's a hard case.
I do
How
not
many
want
of
to-
you in this room
Wait,
think
wait,
Rhode Island
stop
is an
that.
undertaxed state?
Stop a minute.
I mean,
I gotta
almost
make the
nobody.
case.
I'm gonna pause across the board. Excuse me, Tom.
No,
You're-
right.
Excuse me. We've got about 3 minutes, and we're going to and then we're going to go to round two. So easy. There's lots of opportunities to make points, but we are going to allow the audience to get some questions in. First question in is, how do we keep young people into the state? And I'm gonna kick that to Sam.
We keep young people in this state by fixing our state's economy. It's pretty simple.
Justin.
I think this may be an area we find agreement on. But I just wanted to point out one more thing here that has to do with this. It comes down to improving the business climate. And Tom, if you want a number, then here it is. Several studies show that Rhode Island has one of the worst business climates in the country. You're not going to attract businesses, and businesses are not going to bring jobs to a state where they can't grow. So if you wanted a number, then there it is.
Wait.
All right,
It's not a number.
I just have to jump in here. I encourage you to read my debunking of the Tax Foundation's Business Climate Index survey, which is a
So wait,
made up
Sam,
by
are you saying
right-wing-
that Rhode Island does not have a bad business climate? Is that the
I'm
case
saying
for
it does have a bad business climate, but the reasons we have a bad business climate are very high property taxes
Right,
on
I agree with
businesses in
that.
our core business district. It's not that we somehow magically have extremely high income tax rates on wealthy people, because that just isn't true. I think it's important to note, because it was brought up earlier, that somehow Massachusetts and Vermont have bad economies, which just isn't true. They have very good economies, and part of the reason they have good economies is that they have more liberal public policy. Rhode Islanders are always jealous of Massachusetts' economy, and I think we should be, because they have good public policy.
Vermont has the lowest unemployment rate of any state in the nation that is not currently enjoying a minerals boom.
And there,
So let me ask a question.
Fair.
Is Massachusetts, I'm going to ask you almost yes or no, is Massachusetts and Vermont the model? And then I'm going to go across the aisle, proverbial aisle, and ask what's the state that Rhode Island should be looking to? So is it Massachusetts, Tom and Sam?
I think we have a much better chance of emulating Massachusetts than we have of emulating Texas.
And Massachusetts is doing better than Texas. It's a much wealthier state than Texas.
That's an interesting statement. Massachusetts is doing better than Texas?
Yes.
Wow.
Massachusetts has significantly higher
one-third of
per
the
capita
jobs over
income.
the last decade were created in the state of Texas. Texas gained 1 million jobs in the last 5 years. California, by the way, another liberal state that you mentioned, has lost 1 million jobs over the last 5 years. The other thing we haven't brought up that's really important with respect to changing the business climate, I mean, Sam, you opened this debate by talking about choice, and I am totally with you. Can we all agree, everyone in this room, that every single worker in the state of Rhode Island should have a free choice about whether they join a union or not?
Yes, we should have.
I want to hear Sam's answer.
You know,
I actually have some data that would be worth considering on that point.
Hold on, I've got one last question, then we're going to conclude this segment. Mike's going to introduce the second, but this last question.
No data. Okay, never mind.
And I'm going to ask each of the four of you literally, Tom, literally to answer under 10 seconds, okay? I think it's an interesting question because I think you've really raised this. Is the middle class taxed more than the so-called upper class in Rhode Island?
Absolutely. By a factor of 2 almost.
Sam?
Yes, the statistics are the middle 20% is taxed at 10.1%, and the top 1% is taxed at 6.4%. That's higher.
Justin?
Well, you can look at it in terms of income tax rate, but you also have to look at other taxes that are in the state.
This is all
This is
tax-
including all
taxes.
tax.
Okay, well, I was going to talk about in terms of the sales tax as well too that we have that is very high that affects the middle class.
Absolutely.
What we're talking about is a collection of
Stephen?
all taxes.
Every single resident of Rhode Island is overtaxed. It's that simple. This is one of the highest tax states in the country. It's not one group versus another. Taxes are too high in Rhode Island because the cost of providing government services about 30 to 40% higher than other states. You pay too much for government, and it's killing the middle class, it's killing businesses, and this is what's causing people to leave the state. And they will come back if you fix your tax system, become a right-to-work state, and deregulate the state. People will come back.
That was longer than 10 seconds. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Segment 2.